hypertension is the #1 risk factor for death and disability in the world. Let me say that again slowly. Hypertension is the #1 risk factor for death and disability in the world. And hypertension is associated, and I don't know what happened to my slides now.
I think you're at the end of your slide.
Okay, I think somehow some other slides got mixed up in there. All right, some blank slides. So hypertension is associated with a number of complications. Stroke. It increases the risk of stroke. It increases the risk of eye damage, blood vessel disease, heart disease, kidney failure, for men, impotence. We see a lot of kidney failure now, and I say that just about every community I go in, no matter how small it is, there's a dialysis center nearby. Hypertension is the #1 cause of kidney failure in Blacks. Diabetes is #2. I remember I was at a conference, and this guy was up lecturing, and he said, we need to go back and tell our patients, you need to go back and tell your patient that if they have hypertension, and there should be a T there, if they have hypertension and kidney failure, and diabetes, they will develop kidney failure. And I jumped up like a jack in a box. I said, that's a ridiculous statement. I said, what you should be telling these doctors to go back and tell their patients if they don't change, they'll develop kidney failure, because both of these are preventable and reversible. And he started studying. He said, well, that's what I meant. I said, but that's not what you said, and people listen to what you say. So hypertension affects nearly 78 million Americans. That's about 1 in 3 persons in the United States live with elevated blood pressure. And that's the ones that know. There are a number of them that have hypertension but don't know it, And hypertension tends to increase with age. So that half the persons living in the United States over the age of 60 have hypertension, over half. But the question is, as we age, is hypertension inevitable? Is it an inevitable consequence of aging? And research, and we like doing research. My background is surgery. When I left surgery in '83 and started practicing alternative medicine, I found a very good, actually 2 very good mentors, Dr. Charles and Agatha Thrash of UG Pines. And I liked them because they knew alternative medicine, natural medicine, nutrition, etc., herbs, but they also knew medicine. I have a research background, and so that really excited me because I didn't want to be looked at as a dumb doctor. So the researchers looked at and measured blood pressures in 1,000 people in rural Kenya. And what they found was as they age, their blood pressures actually went down instead of going up like it does here in the United States. So they found that the difference was that the Kenyans were eating a diet that's centered around whole plant foods. That's whole grains, beans, vegetables, fruits, and dark leafy vegetables. And the key is whole plant foods. You know, if you listen to people who talk about holistic medicine now, they don't talk about vegetarianism or even veganism, because you can be a vegan and eat just as unhealthy as a meat eater. And in fact, there was one study that showed that vegans were actually dying of heart disease at a higher rate than meat eaters. And when they looked at it closely, they found out that the reason was they were consuming all of these omega-6 and omega-9 fatty acids instead of the omega-3s. And then when they corrected it, and they started looking at vegans who were eating omega-3 fatty acids, then they certainly live much, much longer than we do. So, and over a 2-year period at one rural Kenyan hospital, they saw and admitted over 1,800 patients, 0 cases of hypertension, high blood pressure were found, and 0 cases, no cases of heart disease. And of course, that's our number one killer. And so, you know, there was really a difference in these, but it's not just in Kenya. Other researchers looked at people that lived in rural China, and they found that they had blood pressures in the range of 110 over 120, 110 over 120. And they had this their entire lives. And in fact, they looked at people who were around 70 years of age, and they had blood pressures average the same as people 16 years of age. You know, and these rural Kenyans, they primarily ate a plant-based diet where they would eat meat only on occasional special events. Now we find that Americans who follow a strict plant-based diet can also have blood pressures in the range of 110 over 65 to 70, all right, based on that plant-based diet. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is salt. And so what about salt? One study looked at Brazilians that live in the Amazon rainforest, and they had a no salt culture. In fact, they have the lowest salt intake ever reported in literature. And in their later years, they still had blood pressures in the range of 100 over 60. Now, is this a genetic thing? You know, are these Brazilians just genetically predisposed to have low blood pressures? Well, actually, they found that elsewhere in Brazil, up to 38, almost 40% of the population had hypertension. Almost, you know, so their levels of hypertension, you know, we said at least 1 in 3 Americans, actually higher than ours. And the reason is their diets. Now, there's a guy who I became very fond of. I first heard him speak about 25 years ago. He's now deceased. But Walter Kempler, he's of Duke. He's a German immigrant, and he started a program called the Rice Diet. All right, and he did it because he found these patients with blood pressures 100, 210 over 140, and so forth. And patient with kidney failure. And there was no treatment. In fact, he said the only remedy for them was death, you know. And so he started a meal plan based on a no salt, no oil, rice and fruit diet. All right. And he called it the rice diet. All right. And he would get these patients down to 80 over 60 even, with no side effects, no medication. All right. And it's interesting, you know, I had one patient, he was on about 3 different blood pressure medicines. And I put him on the rice diet. And I told him, I said, now you need to get into the cardiologist and have him cut back your medicine. And he called me one day and he was lightheaded, and, you know, little disoriented. So I said, get in here, man. So he come in my office, his blood pressure is 78 over 52, you know, and it's because he started on the rice diet, but he did not decrease his medication. What I find is that patients that I put on this program often can get off their medications in the first week, often in the first week. So then are all salt the same? You know, well, studies show that refined salt, you know, what we buy in the store, actually can cause hypertension. But the natural salts, the Celtic salt and Himalayan salt, with adequate water intake, can stabilize irregular heartbeats and can normalize blood pressure. So in other words, if you have low blood pressure, sea salt, and actually I recommend Himalayan even over sea salt, can raise your blood pressure, and if you have high blood pressure, it can lower your blood pressure. Dietary potassium. Now, some of you may be familiar with the late Dr. Sam Deshay. Dr. Deshay, in fact, I have one of his products here in my room. Dr. Deshay developed this lotion to lower blood pressure. And the key was potassium, because Dr. Deshay spent many years in Africa, and he noted that the Africans that were on a plant-based diet, which is high in potassium, had no problems with blood pressure. But Africans that had gone to the United States or Europe and studied and was on a more of a American type diet, Western type diet, their blood pressures were much higher. And he started this lotion where people just rub it on their skin, and the potassium would get into the bloodstream and lower the blood pressure. And so other studies have shown, looking at different populations, that a higher dietary potassium diet was associated with lower blood pressures, regardless of the sodium intake. So the bottom line, the issue is not the sodium. Sodium and potassium are both salts. Sodium is the #1 extracellular salt, and potassium is the #1 intracellular salt or ion. All right. And so what do we do for people who have high blood pressures? One of the first things we do is we decrease their stress. I tell people that I believe, and research is now catching up with me, that stress is the number one cause of death in this country. Stress is the number one cause of death in this country. So what do? We need to take our burdens to the Lord and leave them there. You know, we say it, but we don't do it. We need to develop a program of daily prayer and spiritual reading, laughter, praise, singing. But I didn't put it on there, but we got to also trust God. And we got to trust him when we can't trace it, all right? Because we can pray and we can read scriptures and still not trust, all right? And still be stressed. You know, stress is a major thing. One of the things that it does, it makes the body very acidic. It makes the body very acidic, and that increases the inflammation and causes all the stiffening of the blood vessels and all the changes that we see associated with atherosclerosis and so forth. And so stress is a major factor in this whole process of inflammation. Another thing you have to do is exercise. Exercise is very important, and I put these in the order that I believe their importance. And so exercise, and the best exercise is walking. Now you hear people talking about 20, 30 minutes a day, and that's fine. I tell my patients, you need to walk until you start to get tired. So if that's, you know, a minute, then you stop, you know, and then I tell them to rest for a few minutes and then walk again until they start to get tired. The operative word is till they start to get tired, and then you stop and you rest, and then you walk again until you start to get tired, and then you quit. And then you come back the next day, and you keep doing that until you get up to that hour and a half. Now, before I became the medical director of Heartland, which is a wellness center in Rapidan, Virginia, I would tell my patients an hour. But as I observed the folk who would come to Heartland, and they would come from all over the world, the ones who walked an hour and a half to 2 hours a day did better than anyone else, you know, did better than anyone else. And so I changed all my literature, and I said, we need to go for an hour and a half for at least 90 days. And then if you want, you can cut it down to 60 minutes. And so I don't look at the distance that they're walking so much. I'm more interested in how long they walk, because as you get in better shape, you're going to find that you can walk further. And so if you just want to walk a mile, after a while you can walk that mile in 5-10 minutes. You know, so the key thing is how long you walk. There's a program called Sprint 8. Sprint 8 is a program where you walk and then you run, and then you walk and you run, you walk, you run, you do it 8 times. I remember first time I decided to do this, and Dr. Campbell, he's a famous trainer of Olympic athletes. Was the first person I'm aware that developed this program, and you know, it helps to get you up to speed faster, you know. And so I got out and with my out of shape self, and I walked for the 3 minutes, and then you're supposed to then sprint for 30 seconds. Well, I sprinted for 12 seconds, and then I walked a minute and a half, and then I sprinted again for 17 seconds, and then I walked a minute and a half, and I sprinted for 18 seconds, and then I quit. I came back the next day, and I finally recognized that I at that point I couldn't sprint, and so I would jog. I would walk, and then I'd jog, walk and jog, and then I would, as I got in better shape, I would increase the speed until I could sprint. But this program is an excellent program. It helps with bringing the blood pressure down, weight loss, diabetes control, the works. So Sprint 8 is an excellent program, and I would encourage it. And then also, we need to do resistance training. 30 minutes, you know, it doesn't have to be every day, but sit-ups, leg lifts, light weights, can really make a very, very, a lot of difference. And if you can't get outside, you can do the recumbent bicycle, elliptical rebounder. That rebounder is a treadmill and rebounder. That rebounder is very, very important because one of the things that the rebounder does, number one, it's not hard on your knees, all right? And number two, the rebounder helps to decrease the stress, all right? Helps to decrease the stress, helps to decrease the depression. And in fact, they've shown that if a person couldn't actually get on the rebounder, and that's a little rebounder, that little round, like a trampoline, all right? And you get up and you sort of bounce up and down on it, and it increases circulation, it increases lymphatic flow. It's just an excellent exercise. But they found that if you just sit on the rebounder and someone else jumps up and down on it, it still decreases your stress and your depression. And so exercise is very, very important. And then of course, nutrition. You know, and the number one option I use with my patients now is the rice diet. Now, and I call it a modified rice diet because I've modified it because with some of my diabetic patients, rice, especially the white rice, although I encourage them to only eat whole grain, but even the white rice would increase their diabetes. And so by giving them, you know, quinoa mixed with the rice or even by itself, you can use wheat, barley, you know, millet, any of the grain, you know, and you find that blood pressure comes down, and it comes down very, very rapid. Generally, and as little as 2 days, 2 to 3 days, you see the blood pressure coming down. Now, and then we start taking them off the blood pressure medicine. I don't prescribe blood pressure medicine initially for patients, but I also don't snatch them off their blood pressure medicine. I tell them they have to earn the right to get off their blood pressure medicine. And they do that by getting on this program, getting on a good exercise program, decreasing their stress, etc. And that pressure starts coming down, you know. Now, there's a group of people that will not respond in those 3 to 5 days. And that's the patient that has renal failure. And the renal failure patient, it may take 3 to 4 weeks for that blood pressure to come down on the right, even with the rice diet. But that modified rice diet, I use it with so many of my patients, because not only does it bring the blood pressure down, it reverses the kidney failure, it reverses congestive heart failure. I had a patient one time, his ejection fraction was 15. Now, the normal ejection fraction should be 60, 65, and at least 50, all right? And that's the amount of blood that is pushed out with each beat of the heart, because the ejection fraction, the fraction of blood that's pushed out. His was 15. He went to the emergency room, you know, and they sent him to a cardiologist. He said, no, I'm going to Dr. Watkins. So he comes to me, and I put him on this program. And this guy was so afraid because one doctor said that he may even have to have, and he was relatively young gentleman at the time. He was in his mid to late 40s. It's thought he may need to have a heart transplant because he's in such bad shape. And in a week's time, we had him off the medication. In 2 weeks, he developed some chest pain, and they put this vest on him that would go off if he had some changes in his heartbeat. And his vest went off, and I remember I was leaving church, and he called me and wanted to know what he should do. And I said, I believe the vest went off because you're losing weight and you don't have good contact, and you're getting the chest pain going down your left arm because you're scared. But I don't have to fight your wife. Go to the hospital, call the ambulance, go to the hospital. And he did. And when they checked him out, of course, I was right. They adjusted the vest, but they also did an X-ray. And his heart, before his heart was markedly enlarged. In just 2 weeks, the size of his heart had shrunk, and now it was what they call the upper limit of normal, the upper limits of normal. 2 weeks after that, he called me again. This time it was on a Friday night. He liked to disturb my Sabbath. So he called me on a Friday night, and he was worried about his electrolytes because on this diet, remember I said, there's no salt. And so he was concerned. He's not taking any salt in. What about his electrolytes? I said, people don't tend to get electrolyte abnormalities, but go to the emergency room and have them draw your blood. Well, he goes back to the same emergency room, but each time he's going to the same emergency room. They do another X-ray. Of course, his electrolyte was fine. I think that his potassium was a little off. No, his sodium was a little low, but everything else was fine. But they did another chest X-ray, and his heart was normal size. All right, normal size. And the doctor said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it because it's working. The other diet plan that I recommend for patients with hypertension is a raw diet. In fact, before I used the modified diet, 2 and 3 were the diets that I mainly recommend. Raw is important because raw diet gives you a lot of nutrients that's not changed by food. There's a guy named, a Baptist preacher named George Malcolm, and I first really got into raw after reading some of the things that he said about dealing with cancer. And after I looked at a video that one of the nutritionists in our church had, and I was very impressed. I said, it looks good, but is it really scientific? And so I go to the School of Nutrition there at Howard, and I had a friend there. I said, find me someone who's an authority on what heat does for food. And she brought me a stack of articles which I read, and it really blew my mind because it showed that heat moderately to severely alters all of the minerals, except all of the vitamins, except niacin and vitamin K, all right? And it kills all of the enzymes between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, water boils at 212. We bake between 350 and 550. So at the temperatures that we're cooking, we're destroying all of our enzymes. And so I started using raw with my patients, and the results were amazing. First, I did it with my cancer patients, then I sent it to other patients and got the same result. And the other program is juicing. Raw juices is extremely important. And when we say juicing program, we're talking about raw juices and smoothies, all right? Raw juices and fresh smoothies that you make. It's also very, very good for getting the blood pressure down. And it is a vegan diet that's mainly raw. but none of those programs are as effective as is the modified rice diet, but they all work. Now, I need to say just a little bit more about the rice diet, because there are basically three phases of the rice diet. The first phase, you're doing rice and fruit, rice or grains and fruit, and you can take in juices, you can take berries, whole food, whole fruit, whatever form, and then you're generally on that for 3 to 4 weeks. And then the second phase, you can add beans, salads, vegetables, and you're on that phase until you get to your ideal body weight, and then after that you go to the third phase, and Dr. Kempner would allow patients in the third phase to eat a little fish and chicken. I tell my patients that I believe if he was alive today, he wouldn't say that, because the fish and chicken is so bad. And so that's the third phase. Now, I've been on this diet for about 6 years, because I said I'm not going to let my patients get well, and I for one get sick, because that rice diet seems to affect all organ systems. I've even started my cancer patients on the rice diet now. So the only thing I have them doing is eating the modified rice diet and the fresh juices for the first three months. And so this is the nutrition program that we put our patients on, and they improve significantly. Certainly, there are other things that we could talk about. All of the 8 laws of health, the rest, the water, all of these things are very important in terms of helping to combat hypertension. But I just highlighted these 4 things, and I'll stop here, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Watkins, for that presentation. We're going to allow everyone to raise your hands if you have a question for Dr. Watkins regarding hypertension and what you just shared. Please raise your hand, and we will allow you to ask the doctor. Okay, Dr. Watkins, it seems as if there are no questions.
That's amazing.
This is first. Okay, we have a few. All right. Barb, go ahead and unmute, please.
Good afternoon. Doctor, can you please elaborate some more about the rice diet? What is it? What does it entail?
So actually, I describe it, fairly well. You're on grain and fruit for the first 3 to 4 weeks. All right, the reason he started this diet was, one, because, as I mentioned, there was no medicine that lowered blood pressure when patients would get in the malignant range, and so the only remedy was death. And so he started this rice diet because it was low in calories, high in unrefined carbohydrates and proteins. And so the kidney, he had done a lot of research on it, and he found that the kidneys handled the rice very well. And I've even seen kidney patients in stage 5 kidney in a month go from stage 5 to stage 4 and then move on. So it's a very good program, but it's hard. When I started on the rice diet, with no salt, no oil. Now I use very little salt and very little oil. But when I would eat rice, I would always put some on there. But it was drastic. Now, the one thing he does recommend is that you can have sweeteners, and he would sugar or honey. Of course, I don't recommend sugar. And so the sweeteners that I tell my patients they can have is raw honey, raw organic agave. They can have maple syrup, especially grade B maple syrup, or something like stevia. But when you add that, it takes away the need for the salt, and it's very, very effective. But persons need to be monitored by someone who knows the right diet, because you can really get in trouble. The blood pressure drops. You get electrolyte imbalances, so you really need to be monitored well. But the program is very, very effective. It works on all organ systems. I've even used it in severe cancer patients. All right, severe cancer patients. The first patient I used it on actually was a physician. He had something called clear cell carcinoma of the kidney that had gone to his liver, his lungs, his pancreas, his adrenal, and his thyroid. He was going to Johns Hopkins on a chemotherapy program and literally dying. And he came to me. At first, I put him on my regular cancer protocol. And then I said, if I don't do something different before he's gonna die. So I brought him in, I put him on the rice diet because of the effect that I had seen on so many organ systems. And in 2 months, his tumor had shrunk to 1/4 of what it was when he started on the program. And we knew that because they did a CAT scan right before he started the program. Tumor had stopped shrinking. A month later, it cut in half. A month later, it cut in half again. And so, and they were thinking that their drugs was doing it. Of course, it was the rice diet. And he's 6 years cancer free. And I spoke to him just as late as yesterday.
Wow, that's such a blessing to hear that. What could be in the rice that's such a benefit? The rice along with the fruit, there's got to be some nutrient that it's created.
Well, there are a number of nutrients. The main one that I've studied has been something called phytic acid, which goes to phytates. And in fact, if you read in the literature, they call it a non-nutrient, but it's a very good nutrient, because it's one of the few things they've studied that actually decreases abdominal fat. It improves the control of diabetes because of the fiber associated with it. It even works with cancer, and there's something called enhanced differentiation, where they've shown that these phytates causes the not only does it kill the cancer cells, it causes the cancer cells to stop acting like cancer cells and go and act like normal and look like normal cells again. So it's called enhanced differentiation. I call it conversion. Conversion. They brought these folks to the church. These cells to church. But it's very, very, very effective on all. It changes the eyes. I reversed blindness in at least 2 patients, because it stops the retinal hemorrhaging, it decreases the pressure in the eye, it gets rid of the edema. I mean, it's ridiculous. People with thyroid, I had one lady, her thyroid was 19 centimeters. I put her on the rice diet, and I had her come back in 1 week, it was down to 13 centimeters. The next week, it's down to 11. And I found out later that the reason it didn't decrease more is because she wasn't doing the rice diet strictly, but it just shrank that thyroid gland, and nothing else that I was doing was really significantly benefiting, but the rice diet did.
Now, Dr. Watkins, you're gonna get a lot of questions now, because you done talked about the thyroid, but we got Dr. Elvita. Go ahead and unmute, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Dr. Watkins, is it?
Yeah, Dr. Ted is fine.
Okay, yes, this is quite very interesting. My main question is, what does a typical meal on the rice diet look like?
So, one of the things that I stress is that it's not just rice. You can have oatmeal, you can have quinoa, you can have bulgur wheat, you can have millet, so it's different grains. And so you fix them in different ways. I remember one time I was on the program and I started having some pain on the left side of my jaw, so that I couldn't eat on that side. And so I could only drink, and I was drinking all these juices and smoothies, which I love, but I said, I want me some rice and beans. And so I went and got some rice and beans from my refrigerator, warmed them up, boiled some distilled water, went in my garden and got some kale, what else did I have?
Spinach.
Parsley, basil, whole bunch of stuff. I got out my garden, I cut up some onions and some garlic, I put it all in there, I put a little turmeric in there, cayenne pepper, blended it up and drank it. It was the best soup, and so you have to just play with the diet, and come up with different recipes, but then, like I said, you can have other things other than just rice. And so,
Okay.
I've talked to people who are from India, and I've gotten some, some of their recipes. I've talked to people from China, and I've gotten their recipes. So I've just tried different kinds of recipes to try to make it as get as much variety as possible, because that's the main thing, getting the variety.
Okay, so on my plate, I have rice, either rice, quinoa, barley, millet, all of these nice grains, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so can I include some, like you did mention kale, I could have some steamed vegetables there, but I'm not.
So that's in the second phase. In the first phase, and I'm really not sure why. I first started looking at this diet, as I said, about over 25 years ago, but I never used it. All right, and it was only about 6 years ago that I had a patient. His blood pressure was like 240 over 120, 130, and he wouldn't follow the diet, and he wouldn't take any medication. So I said, I got to do something. This fool's gonna die. And so I started researching, and I came across this rice diet, and I smacked myself because I said, boy, you've had this information for over almost 20 years. And so then I started really delving into it, and I discovered that it really worked. It really worked.
Okay. All right. So the rice diet, basically the grains and stuff like that, and you have fruit.
Yes, that's for the first 3 to 4 weeks, and then after that, you can add other things to the diet. The greens, the beans is in the second phase, and salads. And in the third phase, you can even add with tofu. I don't recommend a lot of the veggie meats, but you could have nuts and seeds and so forth. So that's in the third phase. And the third phase is basically life. So I'm still in the third phase and plan to be on it for the rest of my life.
Okay. So, Dr. Watkins, someone wants to know if they're pregnant. What do they do if they have high blood pressure?
So I would have to look at that. I would think that they could probably do the rice diet. The Japanese have the second highest life expectancy in the world, and they eat a lot of rice. The Africans, at least the ones that's on a traditional diet, they eat a lot of rice. So they probably could do it. I have problems recommending things to people who are pregnant, because that's where doctors get sued dealing with pregnancy. Because the jury is not interested in facts. They just, they go by emotion. And so I would tend to not recommend it. I would tell them to go do the research for themselves, and I would maybe give them stuff to read. But they probably would do very, very well on that diet. As I said, the blood pressure is generally down in 2 to 3 days. All right. But of course, you're still hypertensive. You're just hypertensive with a normal diet. I mean, a normal blood pressure.
Okay.
I know I danced around that.
All right,
question.
we're gonna go to Galaxy. Yeah, that's okay. I understand. Go ahead, Galaxy, and unmute, please.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I want to know what is a good source of potassium, or the best source.
So the best source of potassium are whole foods. Your fruits, your vegetables, your seeds and nuts. They're excellent sources of potassium. And that's why I'm going to mention Dr. Deshay. He looked at the Africans following the traditional plant-based diet. They had no blood pressure. When I started practice, I first worked with a gentleman, Dr. Warren Harrison, who also is Adventist and who had spent many, many years in Africa. And he loved to go to Africa. He would go supposedly for a month and stay 6 months, And one time he came back and he was so depressed. I said, Doc, what's wrong? He said, in all of my years in Africa, I've never seen anybody with hypertension. He said, now they have malignant hypertension. I said, why is that? He said, because they're eating all this salt and American-based diet. So if you eat a plant-based diet, whole food, you'll get all the potassium that you need.
So the key must be simplicity.
Yeah, I remember I called, I mentioned her before, Dr. Agatha Thrash, maybe 4 or 5 years before she passed. And I asked her, did she use any supplements for potassium? She said, no, Doc, I just put my patients on a plant-based diet, and that gets the potassium off and brings the blood pressure down. So I stuck with that.
Okay, the love of God, go ahead and unmute.
Yes, hello, Dr. Watkins. I want to ask a question about the rice diet in phase 1. Are there any measurements that need to be used as far as the grains or the rice is concerned? And we do just the 3 meals a day, no in between. Please elaborate on that a little bit.
So I have a whole thing that I wrote up for my patients, and I give them. For instance, they're eating about a cup of grains with each meal, and they'll eat 2 to 3 meals a day. They also will have about 3 servings of fruit, and then we actually define what a serving is. 3 servings of fruit with each meal, and they walk. One of the things I have the original recommendations that Dr. Kipner gave his patients, and he had on the schedule at least 5 times a day that they could walk. All right, and one of the things that the rice diet will do is help people who are overweight to lose weight. All right, people who are like I was underweight when I started the rice diet, and I've actually gained weight. This is the first time that I've ever been in the normal range for weight all of my life. You know, I mean,
Wow.
my nickname was Weenie Built in school, you know, because I was so skinny. But I've gained probably about 20 pounds since I started the rice diet.
Wow.
But that's over time. You know, yeah.
Okay, thank
No,
you very much. I know that you're a good doctor because you treated my mom.
Oh, fantastic.
And so
Fantastic.
God is good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Watkins, I think that might be it. I'm not sure if we have any in the chat. But I know here that you can lose weight with it. So
Yes, you can
that's
lose
something
weight.
that they didn't hear. So when you talk about the rice,
He's had people to lose, Dr. Kempter had people lose over 300 pounds on the rice diet. But he was very, very strict, much stricter than I am, you know. Matter of fact, he was sued for whipping some of his patients, you know. The weight will come off. The weight will come off.
okay. What about someone wants to know what's the measurement? So is it a cup of rice and 2 cups
Yeah,
of
so initially, as I said, it's 1 cup of rice or 1 cup of grain and 3 servings of fruit with each meal. So a serving is like a medium-sized apple, orange, banana, pear, a half a cup of juice, you know, half a cup of applesauce. That would be considered a serving of fruit. And you need 3 of those with each meal.
And so would they be full with that type of diet?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Plus you're
All
drinking
right.
water. You're drinking water.
Okay. All right. iPhone, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Watkins and the rest of you. I just want to know, I came in on the tail end of this, and I just want to know, is there any way you are recording this? Can it be reviewed later, like on Facebook or YouTube or anything, or a website?
Yes, we'll make it available, MM Healthline. So please email us
Okay.
if we did not make it available on time. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
That's mmhealthline@gmail. Yes, thank you.
mmhealthline@gmail.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
You're welcome. All right, Tisha, go ahead and unmute, please.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Watkins. In what order should you eat the food? Do you eat the fruit first, and do you take a little break, maybe 10 minutes, and then the rice?
Well, I eat mine together.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Tisha. Tisha, go ahead and unmute, please.
Sorry, Raina, I didn't take my hand down. I just asked my question.
That's okay. Yes. Julianne. Go ahead and unmute, please.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. Mhm.
All right, good afternoon, pleasant to everyone. Doctor, do you have a website or anything where we can go to get more information?
So I don't really discuss the in any detail the rice diet on my website. I do have a website, and that's because I don't recommend patients trying to do the rice diet on their own. Dr. Chepner himself said that patients trying to do it on their own, it was dangerous, and so I recommend that they're monitored by myself or someone who's familiar with the rice diet. But my website is twiliving.com. twiliving.com. That's the TWI for the Watkins Institute. twiliving.com. There's a lot of other information on there, and maybe some patients may even talk about it, but I don't discuss it on the website.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and if someone has had issues with hypertension so bad where they wanted to have surgery, would this still be a good diet for them?
So if they have hypertension and they need surgery, then they probably have what's called a primary hypertension, where they have a pheochromocytoma, they have problem with the adrenals, adrenal adenoma, something like that. So if that's the case, they may need the surgery. I've not treated anyone with that type of problem with the rice diet because their blood pressures can be very, very high. Although the way it worked with some of my patients, they may even get results, but I would have to really monitor them very, very closely, make sure that they don't get in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna go with.
If it's some other reason for surgery, they probably would get results with the rice diet. The only thing that seemed like it took a long time to come down is people with renal failure.
Okay. It took a longer time than the average.
A longer time than a person. It may take up to 3 to 4 weeks for their pressure to come down.
Okay. And so you mentioned also the sugar levels coming down. I had heard another medical missionary sharing that as well. Just being on rice allows the diabetes to lower.
Yeah. Now, initially, it doesn't just drop like the blood pressure. I actually, if a patient comes to me and he has hypertension and diabetes, I actually treat unless the hypertension is severe, I treat the diabetes first. When I put them on my fasting cleansing program and get them off their diabetic medicine, and then I put them on the rice diet and bring the blood pressure down. So I take it in that order. But Dr. Chepner thought that the rice diet was actually going to make diabetics worse, but he found that it actually reversed it because the end organ, the pancreas, the liver, the muscles, all of those are being improved by the rice diet.
Okay. Great. Diane, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Watkins, for the presentation. You just pretty much answered my question. That was my concern as far as someone, I'm a medical missionary, and I like to know, like if someone is a diabetic, you want to, as first giving them the rice and that sort of thing. I thought that will cause them
their sugar to be worse because it is like breaks down to sugars part, the rice and all that. So you pretty.
That actually, we don't really see a tremendous spike in the sugar, but I like to just get there. I tell people that diabetes is one of the easiest diseases to reverse. And so in a week, generally in 3 to 5 days, I have most of my patients, if not off of the diabetic medicine, on much lower dose. And so it's so easy for me to get control of it completely with our fasting program, our fasting cleansing program. And so I just do that first. But Dr. Chipner, he just put him on the rice diet and brought it down. And there's others that I know who do the same thing. But I use I use my cleansing program.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, it's good to know that. As a medical commissioner, you want to know as much as you can. And I was thinking also at first, like someone that if they're on a rice diet, if they have high cholesterol, something like that, would you still put them on this here?
I've not put a patient on cholesterol medicine, Enovol, in over 20 years. Cholesterol, next to diabetes, cholesterol is easy to reverse. You get them off the fat, the cheese, the meats, and the oils and so forth, and that cholesterol would drop like a rock.
Okay, so you do that. You have them to change their diet before you put them. Because my concern was like if they do have that.
If they have high blood, they have high cholesterol, I put them on the rice diet, the cholesterol comes down.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yes. There's a lot of misgivings about rice, but as I mentioned earlier, the people who live the longest in the world eat a lot of rice. They don't have high cholesterol, they don't have heart disease, they don't have hypertension, none of that,
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
But we recommend whole grain rice.
Right.
Recommend whole grain rice.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dr. Watkins, someone is asking, how after 3 weeks, what exactly would be done on the rice diet?
Again, they go to phase 2. There are 3 phases of the rice diet. The first phase is 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how they respond. And if their response is not significant enough, I'll keep them in phase 1 even longer to make sure we get that blood pressure down, or people with severe kidney failure, stage 4, stage 5 kidney failure, we may have to keep them on longer to get those changes. And then we go to phase 2, and then once we get them to their normal weight, we go to phase 3. And so we take them through the various phases of the rice diet.
Okay, so the most important thing that I think you were sharing as well is just no oil, no additives. It's just rice, right?
It's rice, and they can have non-salt seasonings, but I encourage all of my patients to use turmeric because turmeric helps to, one of the things that we find with the rice, is that the rice has a lot of arsenic, unless it's from Thailand. It has a lot of arsenic in it, and some have more than others. But the turmeric helps to negate the negative aspects of the arsenic.
Okay.
And so I use turmeric always in my rice.
All right. We also had a question. I'm hoping that we got there.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I lost you. I lost you for a few minutes there. You're still breaking up. So, one of the things we mentioned, you have to be very careful that you're monitoring. I have, when I put patients on the rice diet, I literally have them call me every day and give me their numbers. And I monitor them to make sure that they don't get in trouble. And then I monitor their labs, and I utilize, cardiologists and so forth, ophthalmologists where appropriate, to follow these patients well. And so you have to practice good medicine. And so we try to do that. We just don't use drugs, and we don't find we need them. Ms. Parker, I think we lost you.
Dr. Watkins, so sorry, I'm in a country area.
I understand.